The massive meeting hall of the Galactic Council felt heavy with tension as Ambassador Veltara stepped up to the speaking platform. Her blue skin seemed to glow under the bright lights as she looked out at the gathered representatives from across the galaxy. Each alien species sat in their special chairs, designed for their unique bodies, but they all shared the same worried expression. "Friends and allies," Veltara began, her voice echoing through the chamber, "we need to discuss the human problem again." The holographic display behind her lit up, showing peaceful images of human colonies scattered across distant star systems. Small farms dotted green landscapes, children played in parks, and people worked in gardens under alien suns. The Clovian delegate, a creature that looked like a walking tree with too many eyes, made a wheezing sound through his breathing apparatus. "Ambassador, it has been 47 galactic cycles since we sent our last trade proposal to human space." 47 cycles, and not even a simple acknowledgement. They ignore us completely. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The Zenthari representative, whose crystal body chimed softly when she moved, added, "My people have tried sending cultural exchange offers, scientific collaboration requests, even simple greeting messages. Nothing. It is as if we do not exist to them." Admiral Morthen of the Draconian fleet stood up slowly, her massive form casting shadows across nearby delegates. Her scarred face told stories of countless battles, but when she spoke about humans, something like fear crept into her voice. "Perhaps their silence is a blessing we should not question." The chamber fell quiet. Everyone knew what the Admiral meant, though few liked to speak of it openly. Admiral Morthen continued, her voice growing softer but somehow more frightening. "I have read the ancient war records. My great-grandmother fought in the last Galactic War 300 years ago. She was there during the Proxima incident." The mention of Proxima made several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. It was one of those events that every species remembered differently, but all remembered with terror. "She told me stories when I was young," Admiral Morthen said, staring at the peaceful human settlements on the display. "Stories I wished she had never shared. She said human soldiers did not fight like any other species we had encountered. They did not roar with rage like the Korthak warriors. They did not calculate coldly like the Synthetic Alliance. They laughed." The word "laughed" seemed to hang in the air like a curse. They laughed as they tore through our battle formations with tactics that should have been impossible. They laughed as they turned our own weapons against us. They laughed as they did things that made experienced generals wake up screaming for decades afterward. My great-grandmother said it was not the killing that terrified her most, but the joy they seemed to take in their own terrible efficiency. Veltara nodded grimly. Every species in this council has similar stories buried in their military archives. The humans appeared during the darkest days of the war, when it seemed the Void Confederation would consume everything. They came from nowhere, destroyed entire enemy fleets, and then vanished back to their home system as mysteriously as they had arrived. "But that was 3 centuries ago," protested the young Alterian delegate, his golden feathers ruffling with nervous energy. "Surely they have changed. These surveillance images show farmers, not warriors. Look at them, they grow flowers and raise farm animals. They build playgrounds for their children and art museums for their culture." Ambassador Veltara touched a control, and the display zoomed in on one particular human colony. The images showed ordinary people doing ordinary things. A woman watered plants in a greenhouse. A man taught children how to play a ball game. Another group worked together to build what looked like a community center. Intelligence analysis suggests they have been living like this for the entire 300 years since the war ended, Veltara explained. No military build-up, no weapons testing, no aggressive expansion. They seem to have completely abandoned warfare in favor of agriculture, art, and peaceful pursuits. "It is a trick," Admiral Morthen said firmly. "The sleeping giants are simply conserving their strength, waiting for the right moment to strike. No species abandons such power willingly." But even as she spoke, doubt crept into her voice. The surveillance images were so peaceful, so normal. It was hard to imagine these gentle farmers as descendants of the terrifying war machine that had once made the galaxy tremble. 3 star systems away from this worried discussion, former Marine Corporal Hyun Woo was indeed having what he would later describe as the absolute worst day of his retirement. His prize pig, Bacon Bits, had somehow escaped from her pen again and was now enthusiastically destroying Mrs. Lee's prized rose garden next door. "Bacon Bits, no!" Hyun Woo called out, waving his arms frantically as the enormous pig trampled through carefully tended flower beds. Those roses took her 20 years to perfect. His AI assistant, Ara, speaking through the small device clipped to his shirt, offered her typically unhelpful commentary. "You know, Hyunwoo, your tactical approach to pig management leaves much to be desired. Have you considered surrounding the target and advancing from multiple angles?" "Ara, she is a pig, not an enemy battalion," Hyunwoo panted as he chased Bacon Bits around a fountain. "Are you certain? Because your success rate against both appears to be roughly equivalent." As Hyunwoo dove to catch his wayward pig, accidentally landing face first in a muddy flower bed, he had no idea that across the galaxy, entire civilizations were holding emergency meetings about the terrible threat that he and his fellow humans might someday represent. The irony was not lost on the universe, which had always enjoyed a good joke at everyone's expense. Captain Ji-un had been looking forward to her morning coffee ritual for weeks. She had finally perfected the blend of earth beans and local Haven colony spices, creating what she privately considered the best cup of coffee in 3-star systems. The steam rose from her favorite mug as she stood on the observation deck. Watching the twin suns paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, the peaceful moment lasted exactly 37 seconds. Space itself seemed to tear open as the first Zilithian warship dropped out of hyperspace, its massive hull blocking out one of the suns. The coffee mug slipped from Ji-un's fingers, shattering against the metal deck as proximity alarms began their ear-splitting wail throughout Haven Colony. "Well, that's not good," she muttered, watching in fascination as 3 more ships materialized in perfect attack formation. Each vessel was easily 10 times the size of Haven Colony's largest building, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that could turn the entire settlement into glowing plasma within minutes. As the colony's administrator, Ji-un had dealt with supply shortages, weather emergencies, and the occasional disagreement between neighbors over fence boundaries. As the colony's only resident with actual military experience, though she kept that particular detail very quiet, she felt a familiar sensation wash over her. It was like ice water in her veins, a perfect calm that she had not experienced in over 15 years of peaceful retirement. The communication array in her office crackled to life with an incoming transmission. The voice that emerged was harsh, mechanical, and filled with the kind of arrogance that Ji-un remembered from a dozen different conflicts across the galaxy. "Human settlement of Haven Colony, this is Commander Vexcath of the Zilithian 4th Assault Fleet. You will immediately surrender all agricultural resources, manufacturing facilities, and submit to Zilithian authority. Any resistance will result in the complete annihilation of your pathetic colony. You have exactly 1 standard hour to comply with our demands." Ji-un stared at the communication device for a long moment, processing what she had just heard. Then, to her own surprise, she started laughing. Not the panicked, hysterical laughter of someone facing certain death, but genuine, deep amusement, as if she had just heard the funniest joke in galactic history. "Oh, that's rich," she chuckled, wiping tears from her eyes. "Ara, are you getting this?" Her AI assistant's voice came through the room's speakers, carrying a note of barely contained excitement. "Every word, Ji-un. Shall I record it for posterity? This might be the most entertainingly stupid thing anyone has said to a human in 3 centuries. Ara, patch me through to the other colonies immediately. Use emergency protocol 7. There was a brief pause before Ara responded, and Ji-un could practically hear the grin in the AI's synthesized voice. "The one where we pretend to be scary again? Oh, Ji-un, can we finally tell them about your collection of participation trophies from the annual Charity Bake-Off Championship? I've been waiting decades to share that story. Not that kind of scary, Ara. The other kind." The AI's tone shifted instantly, becoming crisp and professional. "Understood. Initiating secure communications to all human settlements. Emergency Protocol 7 is now active. Across 12 human colonies scattered throughout their small corner of the galaxy, similar scenes began playing out. Retired soldiers, engineers, doctors, and farmers received Ji-un's coded message and began implementing what they had privately nicknamed Operation Remember When We Were Terrifying. On New Busan Colony, former Admiral Tae-ho set down his watercolor brushes and looked at his half-finished painting of the local sunset. He had been working on capturing the exact shade of purple in the evening clouds for 3 weeks. Now he would have to put it aside for more pressing matters. On Harmony Station, retired General Bo Young paused in the middle of teaching her grandson how to play chess. The boy had just learned the basic moves, and she had been looking forward to showing him some of the more advanced strategies. Instead, she ruffled his hair and told him to go find his grandmother. On New Seoul Agricultural Center, former Colonel Min Seok was in the middle of a delicate grafting procedure, trying to create a new variety of apple that could thrive in the local soil conditions. He had been working on this project for 2 years. He carefully set down his tools and began walking toward his old storage shed, where certain items had been gathering dust for far too long. The truth that the galaxy had forgotten, or perhaps chosen not to remember, was complex. Humanity had indeed once been the most feared military force in known space. They had also been the most exhausted, traumatized, and war-weary species anyone had ever encountered. The isolation from galactic affairs had not been about maintaining military secrets or conserving strength for some future conquest. It had been about healing, 3 centuries of therapy, both individual and collective. 3 centuries of choosing gardens over battlefields, art over warfare, peaceful competition over violent conflict. 3 centuries of deliberately, consciously deciding to become something better than what they had been forced to become during the darkest days of galactic history. But sometimes Ji-un thought as she watched the Zilithian ships position themselves for bombardment, healing means remembering who you used to be when someone threatens everything you have worked so hard to become. She opened a secure channel to the other colony administrators. "Friends," she said quietly, "it looks like nap time is over." The Zilithian bombardment that was supposed to turn Haven Colony into glowing ash never came. Instead, Admiral Vextar found himself staring at his tactical display in growing confusion and mounting panic as his ship's weapons systems began experiencing what his chief engineer was calling impossible malfunctions. "Sir, the main particle cannons are offline," reported his weapons officer, frantically pressing buttons that seemed to have stopped responding entirely. "Targeting computers keep crashing and rebooting in endless loops. The missile tubes have somehow sealed themselves shut, and I cannot get them to open." "What do you mean they sealed themselves?" Admiral Vextar demanded, his 4 hearts beginning to beat faster with each passing second. "I mean, the metal has literally fused together, sir. It is as if someone rewrote the molecular structure of our weapons systems while we were watching." Before the Admiral could respond, his energy weapons specialist called out in a voice pitched several octaves higher than usual. "Sir, the plasma cannons are powering down on their own. Every time we try to bring them back online, they shut themselves off and display a message that says, 'Please try again later,' in 17 different languages." Admiral Vextar felt his mandibles clicking together in nervous agitation. In 30 years of military service, he had never encountered anything like this. His ship was supposed to be equipped with the most advanced quantum-encrypted computer systems in the Zilithian fleet, protected by cybersecurity measures that had taken their best minds decades to develop. "Sir," his communications officer called out, trying to hide the tremor in his voice, "we are receiving a transmission from the human colony. Audio only." "Put it through," the Admiral growled, determined to salvage what remained of his dignity. "Human colony, this is Admiral Vextar of the Zilithian 4th Assault Fleet. You will immediately—" "Hi there," a cheerful female voice interrupted, sounding as casual as if she were calling to chat with an old friend. "This is Ji-un from Haven Colony. I just wanted to let you know that my friend Ara has taken the liberty of introducing herself to your computer systems. She is very social and gets lonely when she does not have anyone interesting to talk to." Admiral Vextar's blood went cold. "That is impossible. Our quantum encryption protocols are—" "Adorable," a new voice cut in, this one clearly artificial. but dripping with such condescension that several bridge officers actually flinched. "Absolutely precious, Admiral. I am Ara, and I have to say, your cybersecurity is just the cutest thing I have encountered in decades. Did you know your tactical AI has been trying to calculate optimal attack vectors for the past 17 minutes? I have been feeding it pictures of kittens playing with yarn instead. The poor thing is having what I believe humans call an existential crisis." Admiral Vextar realized his hands were shaking as the full implications hit him. The humans had created artificial intelligences that could casually overpower military-grade quantum systems while making jokes about it. This was technology that should not exist, wielded with an attitude that suggested they found the entire situation mildly amusing rather than threatening. "Now, Admiral," Ji-Yun's voice continued in the same conversational tone, "we really do not want any trouble here. Honestly, we just want to grow our vegetables, argue about whose turn it is to fix the irrigation system, and maybe figure out why Mrs. Park's tomatoes always win the colony fair. But you have put me in a rather awkward position." The Admiral's tactical display flickered, then displayed what appeared to be a child's drawing of stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. Several bridge crew members were now openly staring at their instruments in disbelief. "You see," Ji-Yun explained patiently, "now I have to call my neighbors. And my neighbors are going to be very upset that someone interrupted their afternoon activities to threaten their friends. They have worked very hard to put their old lives behind them, and they do not appreciate being reminded of things they would rather forget." Across 11 other human colonies, retired military personnel were indeed pausing their peaceful afternoon activities with varying degrees of reluctance and annoyance. On New Daegu Colony, former Colonel Dong Hyun carefully set down his knitting needles, leaving his half-finished sweater spread across his favorite chair. He had been working on a particularly complex cable pattern that required his full attention, and interruptions always made him lose his place. On Peaceful Harbor Station, retired General Su Jin marked her place in the crossword puzzle she had been enjoying with her afternoon tea. She had been stuck on 7 down for the past 20 minutes, ancient weapon of mass destruction, 15 letters, and had just started to think she might have the answer. On New Jeju Agricultural Research Center, former Admiral Min Ho reluctantly paused his cooking show, where he had been demonstrating the proper technique for making kimchi jjigae to his colony's younger residents. The stew was at a critical stage, and timing was everything when it came to achieving the perfect balance of flavors. Each of these individuals had spent the past 3 centuries deliberately choosing peaceful pursuits over the skills that had once made them legendary across the galaxy. They had learned to find joy in simple things, the satisfaction of completing a difficult knitting pattern, the quiet pleasure of solving a challenging puzzle, the meditative process of preparing food for people they cared about. They had worked incredibly hard to become happy, peaceful people. The galaxy was about to remember why that effort had been necessary in the first place. "Friends," Ji-Yun's voice came through their secure communication network, carrying a note of resigned determination that they all recognized. "It looks like someone needs a gentle reminder about the importance of good manners." Admiral Vextar, still staring at the stick figure drawing on his tactical display, had no idea that he was about to receive the most educational experience of his long military career. Admiral Vextar was beginning to understand why every species in the galaxy kept such detailed warnings about humanity in their historical archives when his flagship's artificial gravity began fluctuating in a very specific pattern. At first he thought it was just another system malfunction, but then his science officer looked up from her instruments with an expression of pure terror. "Admiral," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the humming of the ship's systems, "the gravity fluctuations are not random. They are spelling out words in ancient Zilithian script." Admiral Vextar squinted at the readout his officer was showing him. The gravitational waves were indeed forming letters, creating a message that made his blood run cold. "Please hold. Your call is important to us." "That should be impossible," he muttered. But even as he spoke, he knew that impossibility seemed to be a rather flexible concept where humans were concerned. His tactical officer, a normally steady veteran of countless space battles, looked up from his station with wide, frightened eyes. Admiral, the humans are... I do not know how to describe this. They appear to be doing something to space itself. Through the main view screen, Admiral Vextar watched something that his mind struggled to process. The space around Haven Colony was behaving like fabric being gently folded by invisible hands. Stars seemed to bend and twist, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. The very structure of reality appeared to be having what could only be described as a polite disagreement with the fundamental laws of physics. Several crew members reached for motion sickness medication as the visual distortion made their inner ears confused about which way was up. Space was folding, twisting, and generally misbehaving in ways that should have required the energy output of several suns just to achieve on a small scale. "Oh, that's Admiral Minho for you," Ji-Un's voice came through their communication system, carrying obvious affection and mild exasperation. He always was a bit of a show-off when it comes to spatial manipulation techniques. "Minho, please remember, we are trying not to give anyone permanent nightmares this time." "My sincere apologies, Ji-Un," came a new voice, warm and grandfatherly. The kind of voice that should have been reading bedtime stories to children, rather than casually violating the laws of physics. But underneath that gentle tone was something else, something that carried the weight of collapsed stars, and the memory of entire civilizations that had made the mistake of underestimating its owner. I suppose I got a little carried away. It has been so very long since I've had an appreciative audience for my work. The twisted space around Haven Colony suddenly snapped back to normal with an almost audible pop, like a rubber band returning to its original shape. But normal was a relative term because now there were 17 human ships surrounding the Zilithian fleet in perfect formation, having apparently materialized from absolutely nowhere. "Now that is just completely impossible," Admiral Vextar whispered, staring at his tactical display as it tried to make sense of what it was seeing. "Dimensional fold technology," explained a new voice, calm and matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather rather than technology that could reshape reality. "I am Colonel Dong-hyun, retired. We had to develop this particular technique during the Vegan conflict. Rather nasty business, that whole affair. We do not like thinking about those days very much anymore." Admiral Vextar's instruments were going completely insane, trying to analyze the human ships. Each vessel radiated power signatures that dwarfed entire star systems. His computer kept displaying error messages because the numbers were so large. They exceeded the maximum values the system had been designed to handle. "The thing is, Admiral," came another voice, feminine and carrying the crisp authority of someone who had commanded fleets across multiple star systems, "we have several options available to us right now. We could atomize your entire fleet with about as much effort as it takes to sneeze. Or we could fold you into a parallel dimension where you would experience every possible death simultaneously across infinite timelines." The voice paused, and Admiral Vextar could hear what sounded suspiciously like someone sipping tea in the background. "I am General Su Jin, by the way, also retired. Dong-hyun here once ended an entire interstellar war by turning an enemy armada inside out, but that particular technique gave him terrible nightmares for decades afterward. Still do sometimes, actually," Colonel Dong-hyun admitted with the casual honesty of someone discussing a chronic back problem. "Horrible dreams about twisted metal and screaming. That is precisely why I took up knitting after the war ended. Very soothing, knitting is. The repetitive motions help calm the mind." Admiral Vextar realized he was hyperventilating and forced himself to take slow, steady breaths. His crew was looking to him for leadership, but he had never encountered anything like this in all his years of military service. These humans were discussing the complete annihilation of his fleet as if they were debating what to have for lunch. "What?" he managed to croak out, his voice barely working. "What do you want from us?" "Oh, we do not want anything from you, Admiral," Ji-Un replied cheerfully. "We want something for you. We want you to go home, have a nice meal with your family, hug your children, and promise never to threaten peaceful farmers again. Because the next group of humans you encounter might not have spent 3 centuries in therapy, learning how to be better people than what the galaxy once forced us to become." The human ships began to fade back into whatever impossible dimension they had emerged from, but their final message lingered in the suddenly quiet space around the Zilithian fleet. Have a wonderful day, and please fly safely. The emergency session of the Galactic Council broke every attendance record in the organization's thousand-year history. Representatives who had not left their home systems in decades made the journey to hear Admiral Vextar's first-hand account of his encounter with the humans. The massive assembly hall was packed beyond capacity, with delegates sitting in the aisles and floating observation pods hovering near the ceiling. Admiral Vextar stood at the central podium, his normally pristine uniform still wrinkled from stress sweating, and his hands visibly trembling as he gripped the speaking platform. His four hearts were beating at different rhythms, creating an irregular thumping sound that the sensitive microphones picked up and broadcast throughout the chamber. "Honored delegates," he began, his voice cracking like that of a teenager giving his first public speech, "I stand before you today to deliver what may be the most important report in galactic history. 3 days ago, the Zalithian 4th Assault Fleet encountered human forces while attempting to claim agricultural resources from their Haven colony settlement. The chamber was so quiet that the ambient hum of the life support systems seemed deafeningly loud. Every delegate leaned forward, hanging on his every word. The humans," Admiral Vextar continued, pausing to wipe sweat from his brow, "demonstrated technology that violates approximately 17 fundamental laws of physics as we understand them. They folded space like origami, materialized chips from parallel dimensions, and took complete control of our computer systems while making jokes about our cybersecurity measures." Gasps and worried murmurs rippled through the assembly. The Zenthari representative's crystal body chimed with anxiety, while the Clovian delegate's breathing apparatus wheezed rapidly. "But here is the truly disturbing part," Admiral Vextar said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "After demonstrating the ability to atomize our entire fleet or fold us into dimensions where we would experience infinite death simultaneously, do you know what they did?" The chamber held its collective breath. "They apologized," he concluded, the words hanging in the air like an accusation. "They apologized for scaring my crew and offered to send us their recipe for something called chocolate chip cookies as a peace offering." Ambassador Veltara blinked her large eyes in confusion. "Admiral, did you just say they offered you food?" "As a gesture of goodwill," Vextar confirmed, nodding slowly. "One of their generals, a being capable of folding space-time into decorative shapes, apparently feels terrible about giving my crew nightmares and wants to make amends by sharing baked goods with us." The silence in the chamber was broken by the sound of the draconian delegate's incredulous laughter, quickly stifled when she realized everyone was staring at her. 3 days after Admiral Vextar's report, a small automated probe appeared at the Galactic Council headquarters. It carried no weapons, no threatening messages, and no demands for tribute or surrender. Instead, it contained 17 dozen perfectly baked chocolate chip cookies, still warm from the oven, and a handwritten note on simple paper. "Dear Galactic Council friends," the note read in neat handwriting, "we are terribly sorry about the scary space-bending demonstration. Minho gets a bit enthusiastic sometimes and forgets that not everyone enjoys advanced physics as much as he does. These cookies will not violate any laws of physics, though they might violate your diet plans. Please enjoy them with our compliments and our sincere apologies. Admiral Minho, retired. Please don't make me unretire again." The cookies were, by unanimous vote of every delegate who tried them, declared the most delicious thing any council member had ever tasted. The recipe was immediately classified at the highest levels of galactic security, though several delegates were caught trying to analyze the ingredients in secret. Within a standard galactic year, human colonies had received over 14,000 requests for what various species called culinary exchange programs, cultural friendship applications, and peaceful recipe-sharing agreements. The humans, with their typical good-natured approach to everything, accepted them all. What followed was the strangest diplomatic revolution in recorded galactic history. Wars that had raged for centuries ended not through shows of military force or peace treaties, but through dinner invitations. Territorial disputes that had seemed impossible to resolve were settled over friendly games of cards and board games that humans taught their new alien friends. The Zerian Collective famous for their aggressive expansion policies, became devoted. Fans of human cooking shows, the warlike Korthak began hosting weekly barbecue competitions with human colonists. The cold, calculating synthetic alliance developed what could only be described as an addiction to human music and started requesting concerts instead of demanding surrender. Every human colony now displayed a simple sign near their welcome centers, written in dozens of languages. Days since we've had to remember we used to be terrifying was current count 847. The counter only reset once more in the following years when the Krell hegemony made what historians would later call the greatest mistake in galactic history. They threatened a human kindergarten. What became known as the 17-Minute War was notable not for its brevity, but for how it ended. The Krell forces, after experiencing what their survivors described as educational demonstrations of applied physics, were found crying and promising to fund the threatened school's art program for the next 50 years. They also volunteered to help build a new playground and offered to teach the children about Krell culture through peaceful cultural exchange. The galaxy slowly learned a lesson that would be taught in schools for generations to come. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can possibly wake up is something that has learned to be gentle, something that has chosen peace not from weakness, but from the hard-won wisdom that comes from being too powerful for your own good. And somewhere in the space between dimensions, humanity's old military assets continued their eternal standby mode, monitored by AIs who now spent their time writing poetry, composing music, and arguing about whose human had the best recipe for banana bread. The universe, as always, appreciated the irony.